The summer 2023 finals are set, and it really kind of came down to one word last night in those semifinal matchups, guys. And no, it wasn't dunks, even though we did see some pretty cool dunks. Shout out Colin Burns, especially. We'll see him in top plays. It came down to size and physicality. That's two words. I break my own rules sometimes, but it really was about the size of Lob City and the Halfway Crooks, who both advance and will face off in the summer 2023 finals on Tuesday, this week coming up. We're going to break down all the semifinal action, preview that finals matchup, and get our analysts here to make some picks. I'm Joey. I have Owen and Ian here on our post-game show. Both winning teams at 79 points. Lob City finds himself back in the finals. It's got to be for the second or third year in a row, at least, since they lost. Every time they've been to the finals, they've won. So we'll kind of give you all the Lob City stats. And it's the Halfway Crooks' first appearance in the finals after taking care of the top seeded Rhode Island Warriors. And let's start with that matchup that was the third matchup between Lob City and the Game Breakers. And it was a double-digit lead for Lob City in that third quarter, but it was a game, and we'll get more in depth in that in a second. We have some stats to break down. I really want to go in depth since there is only 2 games this week. And then, like I said, I know we have some previewing to do for the finals, where when these teams met in the regular season, it was a 1-point game. And I've already seen some of the conversations with Simon, who's doing the preview article. So he's talking to Jeff and Jose, and both of them basically saying, can't really look at that matchup too much. The teams are very different now, both more at full strength. And we'll kind of get to the surprise reappearance of Carl Lee. Don't know if that was partially my fault. He posted on his story it was a 10-week injury. Did he lie? Who knows? Probably not. But he played last night, and his presence was felt. Let's put it that way. So we'll start there with Lob City. I believe it was an 8-point win. Yes, and it got up to double digits, where kind of knew it was Lob City's night. They started out early and started out hot, hitting some shots. The Game Breakers were able to weather the storm. I don't remember if the Game Breakers ever had a lead. If anything, it was a single-digit lead for sure. Maybe a couple points where the Game Breakers were able to take a lead, but it was really all Lob City, and they used, we didn't want to call it a death lineup, but they used a certain lineup. And so I'll throw it to you guys as we break down Lob City and what they were able to do to be successful. While they, like I mentioned, they lost their 2 regular season matchups in a very different looking Lob City team. They played much better. In large part, they had much of their full team, which obviously helps come playoff time. So Ian first. I know we were talking before we went live, but Lob City 79-71 over the Game Breakers. Ian, go anywhere you like. There's plenty to talk about in 2 really, really good games from the semifinals.
Yeah, Lob City played a great game, and I said it last week. I said the one player that was going to be the factor, depending on if they win or lose, is Nuri, and Nuri came out, played a physical and very defensive game. I thought he played very well. He only had 5 points, but that is nothing compared to his presence made on the court. He was not locking up, but he was limiting Gian, Hachi. He was playing spectacular defense, being a vocal leader. But yeah, like you said, that supposed death lineup before they got on the floor, with Carl coming in from his injury, this is really hard to stop.
Yeah, and we'll kind of put some names to that lineup. So they, in large part, and we'll focus on that fourth quarter when they really took the game and finished the deal. Lob City did, but Jose Mercado led the way with 30. He's a part of that lineup, that just their bigger lineup that they're able to put together. Colin Burns with 24, Carl Lee we talked about with 13, and Nuri Mahmoud with 5, and was kind of on, I believe, Secator a lot of the night. And I'll let Owen kind of touch on that matchup. But I know we'll talk about Lob City's lineup. The Game Breakers hitting threes, I think, really in that first half. And Cody kind of said at one point to me, they're taking tough shots, and if they hit them, you kind of shake your hand and move on. But then they started not to get as many of those to go. I mean, they're human, right? Surprise. And you always want the easiest or the best shots you can get. And just some of them didn't go. Lob City used their size and was able to, hold off the Game Breakers, who made a run as we expected. They're a good team. They made a run and made it interesting. But Owen, even talking about that second half, and maybe if the Game Breakers, for a second, they had their 4 guys and really, like I said in the intro, that size was noticeably the key for Lob City.
Yeah, size is something you didn't really notice throughout the year with the Game Breakers, because all of them can jump out the gym with guys like Secator and DePina. So you never really thought about size, but then when you go against a team with such big size, it's hard to really go out and win. And when Lob City uses their size to their advantage, it kind of made it tough all night for the Game Breakers. They made it close because they're a talented team, but ultimately size was that little edge because at the end of the day, it was an 8-point game. So it was close throughout. It's just Lob City with their death lineup, so you call it. It definitely took a toll on the Game Breakers, and they played a great strategy. Honestly, they both were good teams, and it just came down to strategy. And I think Lob City had a better strategy in this one.
It's funny. I said coming in, we're not going to call it the death lineup because we used that term a lot last season and even maybe 2 seasons ago with the Duyes boys and their 4-man lineup. And so, of course, they still get a shout out even when they're not in the freaking semis. But the Game Breakers, Gian Avedijian, 27, Joe Secator, 21, David Depina, 16, and Hachi Amini with 7, 3 for 15, which is unlike him from everything we've seen. He didn't hit a 3, neither did Depina. Really 8 for 34 from the Game Breakers. It felt like an 8 for 34, I think, for the types of shots they were getting. And they were trying to, at least from what I saw, play that way, realizing they had to overcome that size, right? And one way to do that is they were still attacking, but the other way to kind of overcome that is 3 is worth more than 2, right? And so and they're great shooters. And so if those are going, that's the other way to kind of combat that. I'll get into that fourth quarter in a second. Ian, even just that second half, or we can touch on that defensive matchup where we talked about that lineup Lob City liked. We just mentioned the 4 guys for the Game Breakers. And I believe, I'm not sure if Anthony Graziano or Sergio Delomba got in. I know they may not have recorded a stat, and so that's why they're not on the screen right now, but they were also there available for the Game Breakers. But really, it was this 4 versus Lob City's 6 guys that they had and used a ton. We talked about it before we came on. It was Hachi on defense, and he didn't have it going on offense, and that happens. But defensively for the Game Breakers, all right, so you're looking around, right? It's Nuri, Carl Lee, Colin Burns, or Jose. And you're like, all right, well, Hachi has to guard somebody. That's kind of how this works. And so it's your lesser of 4 evils. And we saw him a lot on Nuri when they were able to choose who they wanted to guard. And in transition, you're maybe not as lucky to always pick who you're going to be able to guard on that end. But Ian, even just talking about that matchup and how Lob City was really able to take advantage of that.
Yeah, they were really just whoever Hachi was guarding, they kind of like put an isolation or have whoever it was post up. And there's a lot of fouls when it came to that too. I know Lob City, Jose, and I believe either Josh or Colin were at 5 fouls. But I think Lob City just moved the ball much better and they had a better team chemistry as opposed to Game Breakers to kind of just all of them can score, but it's more like isolation ball. And I feel like later on in the game, they kind of all started to butt heads, and it just, that chemistry wasn't there as Lob City had.
And before I forget, Owen made the point about how the size difference, because it's not like the Game Breakers were missing any of their players. This is their team, and they were able to kind of overcome that size, disparity when they played Lob City earlier in the year, when they played a team like the Halfway Crooks, or even, there's not really many others that can load up on size like that, but they were able to overcome it all year, and a lot because they were faster and able to really like double down low and recover. And Lob City just went quicker and was able to get those easy buckets inside and attack on the drive. So I wanted to touch on that. And also just looking at Jose Mercado, I know we, shouted out his 30 points, 1 for 14 from 3. So at least I do have something in common with Jose, guys. Can both go 1 for 14 from 3. I know what that feels like. As my dog agrees with the 1 for 14, but they were down 11 in the third quarter and they were cut it to 3 as I rewatched that game. And the Game Breakers had it to 3 with 4 or 5 minutes to go, I believe. And at that point, the Game Breakers had the ball down 3. Gian Avedijian airballed to 3, and it kind of summed up their night. And that was the closest they would get in that fourth quarter. So even just kind of focusing on that fourth quarter, and even fourth quarter, as you can see there in the stats. But Lob City started with a 8-point lead, obviously, and then finished with an 8-point lead, but it wasn't without a run from the Game Breakers, Owen.
Yeah, it came down to a run, and it was like you said, the defense in this game is it's so much different than the regular season, and Lob City just turned it up defensively, where the Game Breakers, not that they didn't turn it up defensively, they just didn't have answers per se. And I think Lob City has been in this situation plenty of times. They've won 6 or 7 titles. So like they know what they're doing at this point. And not that the game breakers don't. I'm not discrediting them at all. It's just experience comes a long way, especially in a league like this where like strategy actually does matter.
And just to get it right, they cut it to 3 after a Hachi layup, and that was kind of when they went away. So Lob City started the fourth quarter with that lineup we talked about, the 4 big guys. They went away from it with about 6 to go. I don't remember, but I think Carl was like, I need a break. Like this has been like, just get me out for a minute. They go with Josh and Cody, who are obviously great options to have off the bench. And that's kind of when the game breakers are able to get it to 3. They get it back to 5, and it's at that 5, point margin. At the 3-minute mark, there's a timeout. Lob City comes back out after a couple minutes, with that lineup and are able to get right to the hoop. A Carl Lee and one, a Jose dunk that we'll see on Instagram this week. And that was it. And you can kind of feel it. And to Owen's point, Lob City at that point is talking to the live stream, talking to the people there. Jose's waving. It's different in the playoffs, and I think Carl Lee was a huge X factor, and we've talked a good amount about him. But I mean, I may have said it, whether it was here or to you guys before. I mean, Carl Lee, just because of his size, and he's also a very good player against a team like the Game Breakers, is that extra piece, right? It all trickles down if Carl wasn't playing, right? Where now maybe Hachi can guard whoever that other person would be on the court, right? And it just changes the matchups a little bit for the Game Breakers. And but credit to Lob City. I don't think there's any other stats. Any other stats, guys, that stand out before we move on? I mean, 5 for 22 from Lob City. So not like they made a ton of threes and just pounded them down low. 32 rebounds to 29, so relatively even. The Game Breakers had 14 offensive rebounds, so they were trying to scrap and get second chance opportunities, and only shot at 40% from the floor, while Lob City shot 55. So if you're getting second chances, that's great. You got, shooting only 30% means you're missing a lot of those even second chances, which isn't necessarily helping overcome some of that post presence down low. Anything else? Good. I mean, I know only 2 games this week, but I think, touched on that one. And Lob City back in the finals, 7th time in 8 seasons, not necessarily 8 years, but 8 seasons. Last year, Lob City played the 4th seeded Werewolves, who upset the top seeded Duyes boys in the semifinals, and that's called a transition, guys. Take notes. It's almost the end of the year. The same type of thing happened, and I think it was more of an upset last year. I actually don't think it was more of an upset last year when the Werewolves did that. They were a good team, but the Duyes boys undefeated, coming into the playoffs and were awaiting a rematch with Lob City. Didn't hold up their end of the bargain, and this time it's the Halfway Crooks taking down the Rhode Island Warriors. Let's get that score up for you, 79-65, and a huge first quarter. And so I'll get to the stats in a second, but 22-12 in the first quarter. And that was after 2 early threes by Robert Braxton. So if you think about it that way, I mean, it was 6-2. So at that point, a 20-6 run in that first quarter after kind of the Warriors coming out and hitting some threes. But it was still a close game. I'm not sure the closest it got, but we'll get to the stats and these guys in a second. I don't think the Halfway Crooks ever trailed after halftime. I know we'll talk about right out of halftime in a second, because that was a huge part in the game where Marvin Dowdell caught fire and almost was able to even the game, and he nearly did give the Warriors the lead. But it is the Halfway Crooks getting to their first finals. We'll go Ian first this time, and go wherever you'd like. Again, plenty to talk about in both of these games.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it was for the RI Warriors, but when you look at this game compared to when they beat the number 1 seed at the time, the Game Breakers, I feel like that game they were a whole different team. Now coming into this, I don't know if they thought they're going to get an easy win or what it was, but the Warriors didn't seem like themselves. But the Crooks they came out of the gate strong. They were hitting threes. They made their presence known, and everyone had a big part in it. Jared was playmaking. He only had 1 3-pointer on 3 attempts, but he was vocal on the court and even off the court. He was helping his teammates, and the Halfway Crooks rarely put on a show. So I'm excited to see what they can do against Lob City next week.
11 made threes for the Halfway Crooks. 3 of them banked in. Spence banked one. Jeff banked one in. I think Taj banked the other one in, like from straight on, which is just again, those are lucky ones. So even if you take those away, a very different game, we'll take it. we're not, it happens. 11 threes. You can probably look at a couple games and see combined over 3 games, we may not have had 11 threes. And so, like I said, when teams are hitting kind of to you guys right after the game, a lot of teams would look that good when shots like that are falling. I mean, 46% from 3. While we're on the Crooks, Spence Freeman with 21, Devin Devampino with 16 and 8, Dom Langston with 12, and Jared Hansen with 10, Jeff Winchell with 9, and Taj Ennington with 9, and Wilbur also with 2. But I think to your point, and early, Jeff did a great job. Jeff Winchell, who is not an all-star, in case you guys were wondering, but didn't even need that to get going, and kind of took it upon himself just to be physical with Charles Alexander, who's a great player, and I think recognized after the game. He texted me and was like, "You guys didn't miss," and yes, like we already talked about, that's very true. But Jeff Winchell early on was just physical with him, and so I'm kind of curious, Owen, on that point, just that matchup early. Charles was trying to get stuff going and was trying to feel out kind of how we were going to play him. But yeah, I mean, early on, even Jeff was like, yep, we're going to be physical with him and kind of try to take him out of his game a little bit that way. And, we'll get to his stats in a second, but I think that was a huge part.
Yeah, I think you're underplaying it. I think Jeff played the best defensive game of the season by far against an MVP type player in Charles Alexander. Jeff just shut him down completely. Charles only took 9 shots this game. Yeah, he shot efficiently, but you only take 9 shots is probably the MVP, if not second place in the MVP voting. I mean, you got to give your hats off to the defense, and especially Jeff. It might not show it in the blocks and the steals, but all around their defense was just incredible. And it really messed up the Warriors because they didn't have that go-to guy that they always go to. They had to rely on other players who all played well, but when you rely on someone for the whole season to play great and then they don't, not that he like didn't try, he just was shut down all day long. And I think it's a big credit to the Crooks and all 3 of their bigs, but especially Jeff.
Yeah, it's always better when you say it, right? So that's called a lob to Owen over there. But for the Warriors, Charles Alexander with 16 still led the way, balanced scoring. Robert Braxton with 15 and all from 3. So even he was saying after the game, he started to find that range, which has been huge for them. We talked about it when they beat the Game Breakers in week 8. 3 big threes for him in that fourth quarter. And again, too early to kind of try to get his team going. Aiden with 14 and 8. So, 4 of 15, though, obviously the way he plays, kind of always attacking, 1 for 8 from 3, that negates my point. But the way he likes to play when he's attacking the paint, 4 for 15 is not what he's planning. And Marvin Dowdell, 14 as well, 4 of 17 from 3. And like I talked about, we'll kind of focus in on that halftime. So it was around a 10-point game. I can do math, but that's okay. It was around a 10-point game, and halftime, we're like, all right, like, it was kind of a game back and forth of like the Crooks kind of being up 10 after the first quarter, the Warriors trying to get back into it and never really being able to overcome it and take the lead. And then, the Crooks would make a couple plays, get the momentum back. And it was kind of a tug of war that way. And at halftime, we're like, all right, like, let's come out, like, let's try to blow it up a little bit. It's a big, like 3 or 4 minutes here, like get it to 15, 16, 17 and try to put that pressure on and like finish them. And to their credit, that did not happen. Marvin Dowdell, 3 of his 4 threes. Yeah, right out of halftime. So you talk about a near 10-point lead, that's 9 points almost instantly to get it back to a 2 or 3 point game at that point early in the third quarter. And then as we go back up and kind of talk about the Halfway Crooks, despite that, right? So even if 9 points early for the Warriors, they still outscored them by 6 in that quarter. And Taj Eddington, I think, coming back, we can kind of touch on him, and Spence deserves more credit. I forget who said it after the game. I mean, he looked like our best player and played like it. 3 for 3 from 3, that always helps. But shout out to him. I mean, a really good game. And defensively is what I was saying to him as he was coming in, after being on the court. I'm like, you're the best player defensively right now, maybe minus Jeff, but Spence was all over the place as well. And Taj being back just with another person that can handle the ball and go and shoot was huge. So Ian, kind of on that, as we start to preview, but we don't want to yet, the Halfway Crooks looking like their full team showed in that second half as they were able to kind of pull away.
Yeah, the one thing I always loved about the Halfway Crooks, they just have a really well balanced team. Like, they got 4 people in double digits, and Jeff and Taj were right there with 9. So basically, that's 6 people in double digits. And I think the 2 most balanced teams are the Halfway Crooks and Lob City. So I'm interested to see the matchups there, some defensive strategies, and how that's going to go against each other. But I feel like at the end of the day, the 2 teams that fought the hardest are now in the finals. So next Tuesday will be exciting.
Oh yeah. And before we get there, Owen, anything else on this game? I mean, even that fourth quarter, I think it might have got up to 15 or 16 at one point and was kind of over, and the Warriors never gave up, but the Crooks kind of were able to blow it open. Spence attacking the hoop. I mean, any closing thoughts on this one, and maybe even the Warriors here, because kind of like the worst night for Charles to kind of not have it for whatever reason. You know, they make 11 threes, but I'll scroll down in a second. They shot, 25% from 3. So that doesn't help when their best player doesn't have it going. Still 11 rebounds and 4 assists for Charles Alexander. So, a great game, but, Owen, on them and that second half as a whole, what'd you see and just kind of putting a bow on this one?
Yeah, the Crooks had the strategy of blowing it up right out of the half, and the Warriors had the same strategy, except not blow it up, but get it a lot closer. And they did just that. It was a game of runs, and the Warriors made it close coming out of that third. Marvin got hot from beyond the arc, but then overall, the Crooks were just the better team in this game. Not that they're the better team overall, but in this game specifically, they definitely were. And the Crooks last week and this week, it felt like the entire game they were just running and running and running. And if they can do that again next week, it's going to be exhausting, but it's definitely going to be entertaining.
Yeah, exhausting. Yeah, I'll be tired, and I, don't do too much. But as we get ahead to that matchup, and let's use that. I forget what week it was. 6, 5, week 5, the week 5 matchup, and I forgot this until I checked right now. Jeff Winchell wasn't even at that game, and I mean, Lob City did not have all of their players either. As we take a look at them, yeah, no Colin Burns for them either, who was still kind of recovering from that back injury he had. So 2 big pieces not there when these teams met in week 5, but it was a 1-point win for Lob City. A very close fourth quarter. They had it a 3-point lead in the final seconds. The Halfway Crooks got a layup and then weren't able to foul. So that's how the game ended, as a 1-point game. But very close, and I'll kind of let you guys start to preview it, even looking at those stats. But what's your key? Let's start there, and I'll kind of throw in stats as you guys go. What's your key with Jeff back? Let's assume the teams have everyone they had today. Okay, I think that's fair for a finals game. I mean, things would have to really happen for some of these guys not to be there, right? So let's assume it's 7-on-7 type of thing. The 7 that played for the Halfway Crooks, the 7 that played for Lob City. What's the key? We'll go back to Ian here. Your key as you kind of look at these matchups initially between the Halfway Crooks and Lob City.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind, the Crooks have already established like their interior defense with Devon Pina, Dominique Langston, and Jeff. But I think the one thing is going to be their perimeter defense and how they're going to stop Lob City in transition. When the game's back and forth and going quick, Lob City will just run up the court, try and get some not easy layups, but they'll try and get some quick layups and dunks off in transition or right after a made basket. So I think a big thing for them is how someone like Jared or Mike is going to be able to play perimeter defense on someone like Jose, who's quick and can shoot threes. And yeah, that's going to be a big thing. My interior defense and transition defense for the Halfway Crooks.
And I think, just to jump in, a lot of that comes from the Halfway Crooks making shots, right? They made 9 threes and shot 30% the last times these 2 teams played, and shot 43% from the floor. Lob City was 50% from the floor, 33% from 3, but 8 for 24, and all 8 of Lob City's threes were by Jose Mercado. So, that's, Lob City is definitely going to try to attack more, and Jose's already said that in his answering his questions with the media this week. But to that point, to keep Lob City out of transition, we talk about it with the game breakers a lot. All right, how do you keep a team out of transition, right? Well, if you make a shot, if you're making more shots than normal, it's a lot harder for a team to get the ball out of the basket and run, right? And if you're not taking a ton of threes, the rebounds aren't as long, because that's the other half of it. If you're missing long, it's much easier for a team to get out and run. So, I mean, it seems simple, but making shots I think will be key. Limiting turnovers obviously is key, and keeping Lob City out of transition. So then we'll go to Owen. Maybe your key in addition to that, focusing more on the Halfway Crooks. I mean, Lob City getting in transition will be their key as well. But what's your key, Owen?
We've been talking about how the Halfway Crooks have to stop Lob City, but now we're going to talk about how the Lob City is going to stop the Halfway Crooks. They're one of the most balanced teams, like Ian says, with guards and forwards. And I think the key to this game is, although they like to run, I think if they slow it down, they're the best team in the league as far as playing all three levels. And I think if they slow it down and use that strategy as their advantage, I think Lob City will definitely have a hard time, because Lob City loves to run and they're great at it. But I think when it comes down to playing defense 4-on-4, it's going to definitely be a challenge for them, but it'll be interesting either way.
As I can hear, I hear Cody constantly in those videos, but I mean, because it's been all season, like Lob City. I mean, like there's a reason that's their name, right? And they all make sure that's their name. But and the other thing to kind of focus on as we talk about those two lineups, and we'll kind of keep going in a little more in depth here. How do those lineups specifically match up, right? So let's assume maybe that's how we start the game, right? And so we're going to have Colin Burns, Carl Lee, Jose Mercado, and Nuri Mahmoud. And then for the Halfway Crooks, the lineup they started today was their three bigs, which is what they've done, but trying to maybe play that lineup more against a Lob City team that is also bigger, with Dominique Langston, Devin Devampina, Jeff Winchell, and then insert, guard here, whether it's Jared Hansen or Taj Eddington or Spence, who was great in the semifinals. So kind of those, I know I named everybody on the Halfway Crooks at that point, but those 4-man lineups, let's say to start the game or maybe even finish the game, like where's the edge, and maybe who do you expect to match up in those lineups as well? We'll go Ian. We'll just keep rotating. So yeah, what matchups are you expecting to see, Ian, as I put you on the spot?
Yeah, I mean, as Jeff, one of the best defensive players in their leagues, you kind of think he has to go up against Jose, because Jose can basically do it all on offense, and he's going to be their primarily like main ball handler. So you think Jeff would have to go up on him, and then whoever's down low for the Lob City, it's gonna be Dominique and Devin, which kind of locking that paint up. And I feel like they'll play a role where when whoever they're guarding doesn't have the ball, they'll be like the main people to help on defense, like help side, and definitely lock up that paint at all times. Because you see, like Carl Lee was spinning off some guys, throwing dunks off alley-oops. So you're going to need Devon and Langston in the paint. But I feel like Jeff is going to have to go up against Jose.
Before we get to Owen, I mean, on a similar point, I think we talked about the game breakers being able to offensively rebound, and how, 14 of them, you would take that if you're the game breakers trying to kind of combat some of that rebounding. There may not be much of that. I mean, Lob City's great at offensive rebounding as well. They crash. I would say the Halfway Crooks usually don't, as we try to kind of stop that fast break. Maybe we lean away from the offensive rebound. It could be a lot of one and done. I mean, there may not be a lot of second chance points. So it really may be those matchups, being the key in that offensive and defensive set. Oh, and yeah, kind of, what are your matchups you're looking forward to, and what do you think?
Yeah, like you just said, I think second chance points are going to be hard to come by. And to finish, defense is great, but if you can't get that rebound, the whole defensive possession is wasted. So I think if both teams focus on defensive rebounding, I think it'll definitely be a lot closer. Probably come down to one of the final shots. I think another key matchup, obviously, it's going to be Jeff on Jose, which I think is right. It's going to be those guards of the Crooks like Jared and Spence and Taj, who they're going to guard, because Lob City, everybody's big. So what Lob City did last week with Nuri and Hachi, they really tried to abuse the size over there. So it'd be interesting to see how the Halfway Crooks can either stop the abuse, or B, really just buckle in and play good defense.
Yeah, and at some point, especially with these teams, everybody's has played in this league, especially, but has played basketball so long that you can start, whatever matchups you guys want, right? Hachi started on Nuri. Jeff on whoever. They're both teams are going to intentionally try to get people to switch, and it's not necessarily that hard when both teams are kind of even, right? You just kind of concede it because it's not the end of the world, at least initially. And so in that case, the offense gets to dictate who they want to attack, right? I mean, that's what they were doing with Hachi, right? Hachi can start on Nuri, but he was getting pinned down low by Carl and Jose at times, just getting in a switch and that was the game breaker's initial game plan to switch it and try to make it work from there. So that'll be happening on both ends, which will be awesome. Both of these games this week in the semifinals were definitely looked like basketball and were very competitive. And I expect it might be a throwback to 90s basketball. And we can kind of touch on that. I mean, that's basically Owen's point. Defensive rebounding, like limit transition, don't take a ton of threes, right? Lob City last time we played. And even last week, they made a good amount, but that's not their, not their favorite thing to do. And the Halfway Crooks caught fire, but again, not their strength, right? So not that it'll be a rock fight, but it could look like, some good old fashioned basketball like that we're all used to. All right, it's that time. So I think any other points? Did we miss anything as far as a little preview? I think we're doing all right. It's going to be a shorter show, unfortunately, guys. I mean, there's not as much to talk about, but anything else before we do some picks for the finals? No, we're all good on that. Great. Just last thing I'll throw in, then I'll get some picks from the guys. Again, back to week 5. Jose Mercado and Carl Lee combined for 66 points of Lob City 72. So I expect that to be a little different with Colin Burns back and in the swing of things. I mean, he was hitting threes in the semifinals, so he looks good to go. He's great attacking the rim, and when he's hitting threes, it's an even bigger struggle. The Halfway Crooks in that week 5 matchup had 5 players in double figures. And again, that's without Jeff Winchell being one of those 5 players because he wasn't there. So again, kind of not that it's going to be the balanced team versus the unbalanced team, because that's not the case, but that's how it played out in week 5. And we'll see how it plays out in the finals. Again, the finals Tuesday night, August 22nd at 8:00, Johnston Rec Center, Johnston, Rhode Island. Awesome crowd, by the way. I meant to do this earlier. A lot of people there. I'm curious to kind of get even up. I'll put Owen on the spot. I tried to tell you that would be good. It was good. I mean, he had some of those dunks and it was good, right? He's shaking his head. Cool.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's what it adds to it. You know what I mean? As if those teams needed that hype. It was cool. So thank you to everyone who came out. If you're still listening at this point, you're definitely a player in the league. So thanks to all the players who came out as well and supported. And we hope to see that again in the finals. Again, Tuesday at 8:00. Can also watch it live on YouTube, but it's not the same. It is definitely not the same when we have that atmosphere going. All right, Ian, he's done a fair job of sucking up. And now I don't even know if you can call it sucking up anymore, because this is, it's your last pick of the year. The Halfway Crooks are underdogs, I think is fair to say, especially when they've won it 6 times, have been there 7 times. They've been together for a while. I don't know what the spread will be, and I don't even really want to guess on that. I'll leave that to the foot doctor on the Low Post podcast. But Ian, yeah, definitely give an explanation and a little bit, and who you're picking, and we'll see. Not that anyone has to suck up. But this is like, the best time to suck up, maybe right now. But Ian, who you got in the finals and why?
I don't think one team is short or lacking in any aspect, but I think Lob City just has a little bit better chemistry. They're just better size-wise. And I think when it comes to matchups, that's one thing I look at. I feel like the matchups just goes in Lob City's favor. And if Carl Lee's back healthy, or at least somewhat healthy enough to play, I think Lob City's going to have that advantage as long as they stay out of foul trouble and do what they did last week. So it's going to be a close one, and I'm hoping for a good game, but I feel like Lob City just has that little bit of an edge.
Yeah, if what we saw last week, and Carl wasn't, he definitely is still recovering from the injury, but he looked fine. like if that's the version of Carl Lee that is, not 100%, that's impressive. That's for sure. The way he played against the game breakers. All right, Owen. So we have one for Lob City. And again, Lob City will not let you forget it. They will stalk you. They'll tag you. They'll, so just no pressure, but who you got, Owen?
Yeah. Jose let me know last week that I picked against them. And this week, I'm not going to do it. I think Lob City is the better team. Like Ian said, it's close throughout. And I think the 2 key players that were missing in week 5, both Colin Burns and Jeff Winchell, are going to be huge in this game, probably going to play the full game. I think it'd be crazy if they didn't. And it's going to come down to hopefully the last shot. I think that'd be crazy. But I think Lob City just has that little more experience in these bigger games. Not that the Halfway Crooks are bad by any means, but Lob City has won 6 out of 7. It's hard to bet against them.
Yeah, we don't need to relive my finals experiences from the Connecticut League. Trust me, a triple overtime loss and then just another loss, which they're never fun. Especially like triple overtime in the finals is not something I wish on anyone. That is crazy, especially when they're 2-minute overtimes. Last thing before we go, your X factor in the game. Okay, so one player, it can be from either team, that if you're watching and it's the second quarter and this person, is on top of their game, that's going to help you, determine who's going to win at that point. So we'll go back to Ian first. Your X factor to watch in this one, as you're watching on the live stream next week.
Yeah, I think the X factor for this game is going to be Spence on the Halfway Crooks. You kind of already know what to expect with the big men on the Halfway Crooks and like Jose on Lob City. I feel like the one big key player is going to be Spence, to see how he can match up and play defense against Lob City and what he can do offensively. You saw this week, he shot 3 for 3 behind the 3-point line, and he just sparks the offensive play as soon as he came in the game. So he's definitely going to be a key matchup to watch and might influence the way the game goes when he's coming in as a potential not 6th man, but 5th man of the year.
Yeah. Owen, who's your X factor?
I think the X factor is Colin Burns. He wasn't there in the previous time that they played each other, and watching him Tuesday night, he just plays so well and so aggressively. And I think if he can get it rolling early, because he's definitely a vocal leader on that team too. I think with both a vocal leader and a just leader in general, I think he could definitely be an X factor.
And the only thing I will add is I think the stat to watch is field goal percentage. And I know that may be, for any game of basketball or a lot of different sports have that stat as like, duh, if you make all your shots, like you have a good chance to win. But I think that will tell the tale for both teams, especially with how much Lob City is able to get inside, how much the Halfway Crooks are maybe settling for threes versus able to get inside as well. And again, like we talked about earlier, to kind of bring it full circle, will, kind of feed into that transition game for both teams, right? If both teams are in the 50s, maybe field goal percentage, it'll be a much slower game, where if maybe one team is even in the 40s, because it could be, 10 shots more that they miss, that can lead to the run out. So, all right, we got 2 picks for the champs. That would make it 7 of 8 for them, or it'll be the Halfway Crooks first. You can watch on YouTube next Tuesday night, like we already said, youtube.com/legacy leagues. And then after that, the season is almost over, even though the finals will be over. But then we have our All-Star night on the 29th. We have our 3-point dunk contest and All-Star game. DJ Krasmatic will be there, which is great. Shout out to him. Shout out to Cellos for sponsoring that night for us. And the contest will be awesome. We have our dunk contest, Joe Secator, Terrence Gallo, Aiden Dozos all committed. Charles Alexander's in. Spence Freeman's in. So that'll be good. We got the right people in the dunk contest, that's for sure. And I hope I said Terrence Gallo, the defending champ, as well. So awesome. The finals will be great, and we'll be live. Our post game next week, we'll be on the court from the finals with the champs on the show. And so we'll see who that is next week and who is holding up the trophy and wearing those t-shirts. So Ian and Owen, good job. Second last show of the year. And we'll see you guys at the finals. Again, Tuesday night, 8 o'clock, Johnston, Rhode Island. See you then.